Good afternoon, everybody. Today is the first session in Exposure to Engineering Practice, which will include lecture workshops, visits by industry guests, site visits and placement opportunities. The first session will be dealing with language and communication, and in particular the appropriate and correct use of language and communication in various contexts and various situations. You need to take special note of this when you're doing or undertaking report writing, especially the use of scientific data and how to correctly represent it. So today would be an introduction along those lines. Bearing in mind that language has been developed by you all through your formal schooling and continues to evolve and grow as you yourselves grow through your lives. This will be just a brief overview, and at the end there's a small workshop of activities that I've designed for you to take part in. So we need to watch words and the correct and appropriate use of words, whether it's spoken or written, and bear in mind the attitudes of the receiver to you and what you have to say. So if you are in a situation where you're writing a report to an unknown group of people, you need to be aware of their attitude towards you in the first place, especially whether the group of people are more knowledgeable than you, whether there's some hostility amongst the audience towards what you may have to say, and take that into account in the style and form of what you have to write or say in terms of verbal presentation. There are also linguistic and cultural barriers that we need to be aware of and conscious of. In some cultures, for example, standing in front of an audience, like I am today, is seen to be threatening, and people prefer to sit around in a circle so everyone's on an equal level. So cultural barriers and cultural differences, as well as linguistics in the sense of people using language in different ways and different meanings, needs to be also taken into account. So the whole style, tone, body language and the setting is all part of what we need to be aware of and take into account when we communicate with others in any form. And if we're not conscious of the totality of this, our communication may not be as effective as what we have envisaged. Engineers Australia have produced this graph, and if you look at this graph, you'll notice that communication presentation skills actually reside higher than computer skills. So for success in moving forward in the profession, in the engineering world, Engineers Australia sees that communication and presentation skills are vital. Anyone here have any opinion on the meaning or interpretation of communication and presentation skills? Anyone? At the back? Yes, you're quite right. It's how effective it is, isn't it? Yes, how effective it is in conveying the message to the respective audience. As well as the diversity of language, we also have the unfortunate ingress of bad uses of language. Situations which might be okay when we are speaking in a more casual setting amongst friends and peers, but totally inappropriate in more formal settings, and definitely to stay away from when you're writing your reports. Could have instead of could have. The like you know. Actually, I don't know, so why don't you tell me, is what I would be saying. We also have the word amazing that gets overused. We do live in a world of superlatives where everyone's a superstar, everything we do is amazing. And my report was amazing. This presentation that I'm going to give you people is going to be amazing. Let your deeds speak for themselves. Don't use your boasting to gain support for what you have to say or what you have to write. An article in the Advertiser, it's one of their series of articles called Grumpy Old Man, has a couple of interesting things here. I like this because it really reflects the way I feel today with what's happening with the language. And I'll just take a couple of these out to extrapolate from the document, just to give you an idea of the bad use of language. So here's an example. He's like all angry, and he's like, "You didn't, did you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." like he just doesn't get it, like he's like all nuts, and I'm like leave me alone like. So you can see, supplemented with gestures, some sentence that's been constructed repeating the word like has somehow developed meaning. In place of finding the real words, we do often use this bad form of communication, one word supplemented by gestures to get the message across. We also have over here, there's the people who can't string words together, and right words are hampered by slipping in the odd and or just want to give them a slap in the ear. Why? Because we haven't taken time to think about what we want to say and move straight into the diction without planning it in advance. There are also a whole string of common errors to be aware of. We are fortunate that Microsoft Word Assistant provides the underlining red, green and blue to indicate some form of grammatical or syntactical error, but it won't always solve writing deficiencies. Errors of spelling. Common mix-ups are with there and there. There, the possessive there, and there meaning a place. It is a contraction of it is. We use the apostrophe to replace the I that's missing. It's hanging on the wall, but its mother is missing. You can see the difference. It's not an it is then. Whose, who is, once again the contraction, and whose in the sense of belonging. Where and where. We are meaning where, as in we are, and where meaning a place. Punctuation. Now with punctuation there's a whole gambit of rules, and one does not hope to understand all of them in the one go, but please refer to the document that accompanies this presentation. There's an appendix at the back that has a lot of these explained in more detail, so refer to them from time to time. We have commas. Now commas quite often used to break up sentences, to separate the introductory element from the rest of the sentence. We also see commas separating clauses, and we have what we call a non-restrictive clause, which is separated by two commas. So if we were to say Bill Gates, comma, the founder of Microsoft, comma, is a successful billionaire, we could remove the middle and simply say Bill Gates is a successful billionaire, and that will still have meaning. So the comma here is used to indicate this element that can be removed. Restrictive situations are where we don't use commas and where the whole clause has to be included in the sentence for it to have any sense or make any sense. So students who didn't study hard enough may not pass the test. No commas. We also use commas to separate out lists. So sharks eat fish, squid, crabs, and humans for that matter. So we'll use comma to separate out a list. Apostrophes often used to indicate a letter missing, so apostrophe S for the contraction, but also used to indicate possession. So if we were to say the driver's car, we'll put the apostrophe after the R because it's a single driver. But if we wanted to say the two drivers' cars, because there's two drivers possessing the cars, the apostrophe will go after the S at the end. With active and passive use of verbs, the verbs are action words. So active use of the verb is when the subject performs the task or does the action, as opposed to passive where the subject receives the action. So passive voice would be the ball was kicked by the boy, whereas in active voice the boy kicked the ball. And we tend to prefer active over passive. In the same sense, verb tense does give us grief at sometimes when we see a sentence that has part of it in the future, part in the present, part in the past. We need to keep the tense, future, present or past, the same or consistent in the sentence. Subject-verb agreement. If the subject is singular, the verb has to be singular. If the subject's plural, the verb has to be plural. So we might have, my brother travels singular, but my brother and I travel because it's plural. Pronouns, words that stand for names, who, which, and the like. There has to be agreement both in gender and in the numerics of whether it's singular or plural. So both numerical and gender agreement need to match the antecedent, as we call it. So we may say the employees who work, but then we'll say the person who works because it's singular. Likewise, the woman who rang yesterday, but the picture which is hanging on the wall. We wouldn't say the picture who is hanging on the wall, nor would we say the woman which rang yesterday, because a person has the pronoun who attached to it. There is this whole array of other grammatical errors, and you need to address them when as required, especially doing it before an assessment task and checking with the appendix to that document that I've already mentioned. Colloquialism, slang and jargon. In a relaxed or familiar setting, we may allow colloquial language to enter into our conversation, such as drop me a line, bucketing down. We also see slang, contractions of other informal words and phrases which are known to most native speakers but often not understood by speakers from another nationality. Busted, which means, yes, anyone? Busted? Over there? Yes, of course, yes, busted, being caught in the act. Supersize, as we do with McDonald's, and social media is prolific in with a whole range of slang terminology that's only understood by people in that group. I came across an interesting one the other day called Brotox, meaning men who do Botox, and I thought that was a bit amusing. Jargon. Difference with jargon is that jargon is used by people in a particular area, in a particular industry, and could be confused by people outside of that industry or area. So we've got legal jargon, we have political jargon, we have engineering jargon. Whack-a-packer, for example. A whack-a-packer is a plate, a vibrating plate that impacts on the ground and compacts soil. Bang for your buck. Nothing to do with letting off a gun or a rifle. It's meaning getting value for your money or getting value for what you're doing. Derivative is interesting because that word has totally different meaning in finance compared to mathematics. In finance, the derivative is the inherent value of an asset embedded in a product or commodity, whereas in mathematics, most of you already know that the derivative is a process that you undertake in calculus. Idioms and proverbs, also part of our language. With idioms, we are talking about phrases or expressions that are very different to their literal meaning. So it's in the ballpark, meaning, it's roughly right. To kill two birds with one stone, there's no feathered creature going to be harmed in this process. Killing two birds with one stone simply means that we're accomplishing two tasks in the one go, in the one action. And then we have the proverbs. Now, proverbs and idioms are different. Proverbs express some commonplace truth or some useful thought, usually handed down through the ages. We have a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step by Lao Tzu, 160 BC. A prudent question is one half of wisdom by Jacob Bacon. Then when we are looking at communication, we notice that when we communicate, we are transmitting more than just the words. We're transmitting our feelings, our emotions, values, attitudes, tones, from our tone of a voice, or even from the way we write. Sometimes you'll get someone writing something to you, it could be an email, that you're really offended by, and the words themselves haven't been offensive, but the way they've been constructed, the way they've been positioned. We see that also in newspapers. If the press wants to bring a politician down, they'll write something in such a way to have some meaning beyond just the words themselves, and the tone and the attitudes that it's reflecting. So take care of that, because sometimes you can be transmitting more than just the words, and the receiver may sometimes be offended by it, or actually not totally have a disposition towards you based on it. Gestures and body language. We convey a lot of spoken words with more than just the words. As I said, we might throw our hands up if we want to show that we're really upset by something, or in a situation where we're angry, we may end up folding our arms in front of our people and do a bit of finger pointing. The meaning with the gesture is very different to the meaning on its own, simply by the words. I'll take an example of someone coming into the room late. I could, for argument's sake, look at my watch and say, "You're late," as opposed to "You're late." And you can see the person's going to receive that message very differently in the two cases. So amongst us, we have all sorts of people. Some, both in the way they talk or the way they write, are relaxed. Others and their speech and their writing flows nicely without it being very tiring. We have contentious people, people who want to make a point about everything, people who are attentive, who listen in not just to the surface value of what you said, but going in deeper to read between the lines, to look at where you're coming from with what you have to say. Precise people and precise forms of writing where everything's documented, everything is exact, very good with engineering report writing and engineering specifications. And dramatic and animated people, and people like this also may be dramatic and animated in the way they write. Their writing is packed with so many expressive words that convey so many meanings. We have also open and dominant and friendly people who in the workplace will stand out for that particular nature. Now, dominant people quite often are people who motivate others. So sometimes these things that look like negative traits could actually be positive traits. In a similar manner, the dramatic person may be the sort of person you need when things are going wrong, to stimulate action, to wake people, to get them out of their slumber. It's in all situations very important to be an active listener, to ask lots of questions and give feedback on things that you don't understand, whether it's in your lectures, whether it's in a task that you've been given, or in the workplace as a whole. And understand and appreciate that we all process information very differently. Some people can cope quite well with simple instructions. Others may need graphics and pictures and more detailed information in order to make sense of what they have to do. In the next slide, I'm indicating the fact that in all cases the audience is vital in what you have to say and do. You need to get to know the audience. Who is it that you're writing to? Who is it that's going to be reading it? Who is it that you're going to be addressing? Is it a presentation to your peers? Or is it a presentation to people more senior than you? In which case the language, the style, the manner will be grossly affected. So try to put yourself in the position of the audience. Will they understand what you have to say? Is the language you're using too complex? Or is it too simple? Is it going to be demeaning to them because it's too elementary? Will they be interested? Will they understand what I have to say? In all these cases, understanding the audience and modelling what you have to say or write around it will greatly impact on the success of the communication process. So target your language and tone and assume knowledge to suit the audience. A situation where a project manager that's not well liked by people, process workers, or not liked by construction crew will not get a lot of mileage, will not get a lot of support from them if he or she is talking in a manner that's demeaning or putting people down. If they are not sensitive to the needs of those people, sensitive to the fact that those people may feel inferior to that particular project manager because of their manner, then the project manager is not going to really get the best results from them. So the tone, language and deportment and lots of other things can play a big role in how successful you are as a communicator. The same topic would be delivered in so many different ways to the general staff. The same topic to management would be in more detail with much more information, with much more in the way of conclusions and even financial issues related to that particular topic, because management quite often want to know the financial implications of whatever's going on. So adjust what you say, what you write, the level, the depth, the language to suit your audience. If it's going to have impact, the audience is central to it. This particular article from Lafferty, it's one of the ones that appeared in a newspaper, is also quite interesting. Did you write this report? Yes, sir. Well done. I can't understand a word of it. So the success of the communication is not in how well you think you've said or written something, but what the receiver feels, what the receiver thinks. Now with writing, especially when we're talking about technical writing and report writing, we need to be aware of the difference between subjective and objective language. Subjective language is language based on personal opinion or personal taste. Saying that I did a good design, I performed a good task, I wrote a very good assignment is subjective. Objective is one based on fact. Saying that a design that surpasses industry standards, the same opinion will hold no matter who is looking at that design, as opposed to the first one, which is subject to personal tastes and personal opinions. With formal writing, especially with technical writing, technical reports, objective should be the main style of your writing. Facts that everyone will agree on, because you are attempting to win people over to accept what you have to say and to take note of what you have to say. So they'll take more note of things that are objective rather than ones based on your own opinion. There is, of course, room for subjective statements, especially when you're doing reflections or conclusions at the end. You may reflect on what's happened and make a statement along the lines that, based on this evidence, implementing process A and B will improve our productivity. So there are places where subjective statements can be correctly placed and utilised. Contextualised language. What we often hear is people saying, this is in the wrong context, you know, you're using this out of context. It means using language or words appropriate to the situation. And if you don't use it appropriate to the situation, the meaning could be distorted. Take, for example, if you're given a task about writing about project management as an assignment, and the task was given to you to write about project management in the building industry, as opposed to writing about project management in software development. Those two assignments or those two reports will be totally different. Simply taking things off the internet or off any other reference and espousing what project management theory and principles are without making them relevant to either of these two situations, your report will not have met its aim. So the purpose needs to be defined from the start. What is the objective? What's the purpose of what you're doing? Is it simply a site memo? That's just some brief instructions. Do not enter, excavation in process. Or is it to rouse action, where it could be more emotive or dramatic? Watch out, there's a fire. You need to escape from that exit. The purpose of what you do will influence the form and the style of the way you communicate, the way you talk, or the way you write. A technical study, for example, will generally be a bit longer. It will include graphics, appendices, will have a table of contents, have specific language. Usually it will have language specific to the industry that you're writing within, and have definite structure. It will flow in certain sequence. The form style of what you say and write also should meet the intended use and purpose. The form meaning whether it's in the form of a text message, a phone call, an email, a detailed report, and the style, whether it's abrupt, argumentative, argumentative, whether it's a narrative, whether it's descriptive, will all depend on what is the reason why you're writing or saying this particular thing. So using the wrong style or form may make your communication ineffective or not have the desired outcome. And with structure, try to commence everything setting the scene. What is it it's about? This lecture is about ABC. This report will look at new innovations in microchip and electronics. That will set the scene so the person knows what is going to be read further on, and they already can start constructing a picture of what to expect. If you have long reports, you need to break them up into headings and subheadings. Sentences should be as brief as possible. Long sentences we should stay away from, as well as keeping one topic per paragraph. So in a paragraph, don't try to include 2 or 3 topics within it. Having a logical progression through from the introduction to setting the scene and elaborating it, with adding more and more meaning each time, and expanding on it as it flows through is important. Try not to put too much information all in the one go. Let it flow and let it evolve and develop. And of course, supporting evidence should go in the appendix. So any laboratory reports, any findings done from testing, any additional statistics, let's say, that you might find should go at the back, because the reader needs to be able to read through this document, this report, in a way that hasn't got the flow interrupted by reading excessive data. And of course, at the end, it will usually have conclusions and recommendations as to tie it all together. Now, there's a danger also of obtaining too much information, and when we obtain too much information, we struck with this problem of needing to cut it down. So once we define the objective, we should then use it to sift through all the information that we collect and work out what's irrelevant. So being succinct or brief or to the point is all about choosing your words and your phrases correctly, getting rid of stuff that's in excess that doesn't really add to it and is repetitive, and does require a fair amount of editing and re-editing. If you don't have enough time to do it, and your draft is also your final because you've left it to the last minute, then you won't have the benefit of reflection. The best thing is you write your draft, you put it to the side, you come back to it later in the day or preferably the next day, and with a fresh set of eyes, you'll pick up things that you haven't looked at no matter how much you've reviewed it again and again and again. You do need to give it a break and come back to it, and in that case you will find a lot of things that can be omitted or restructured. And doesn't mean though that when you're succinct or concise that you're getting a lot of information thrown out. It's using the same information but rebadging it in a way that is more brief, using less words. There is a principle which is sometimes called the KISS principle, keep it simple sweetheart, or keep it simple stupid, which means don't go overboard being very repetitive and keep to the point. It does require good language skills. You know, the people who write the summaries to at the back of the book, the reviews that you see on the back cover of a book, or the bottom of a trailer to a movie. In one paragraph, they have painted such an immense picture filled with rich language and using very, very few words. So there is a language level that not all of us possess to be able to fully utilise succinct writing. And at the end of this document that I've mentioned a few times, you'll see in the appendix a list of a lot of the important terms and important words that you'll come across in your studies. If you don't understand these words correctly, you do need to look at this appendix from time to time, especially before performing an assessment task, only because you'll not answer the question correctly without knowing it. So in mathematics, for example, we have terms like factorise, expand, differentiate. Differentiate means a lot different, has a very different meaning there to a situation where you are asked to differentiate between rural and urban communities. In a social setting, it's very different to a mathematical setting. Analyse and illustrate. If you're asked to analyse something, it's asking you to examine a situation or any collected data, as opposed to illustrate, which is really just to provide examples of the situation. So if you were asked to analyse and you simply just provided examples, you will not have addressed the question correctly. So you do need to get to know the terms and their meaning. So in this glossary, as I said, at the back of the handout, that it will be uploaded into the Moodle site, you have a lot of the key words and terms that you'll come across in your studies. Get to know them, refer to it from time to time, especially before performing your assessment tasks. And that concludes my part. If there are any people who have any questions to raise with regards to anything that I've covered. Anyone? Yes, at the back. Right. Yes. Now, look, you've taken a very complicated question. The question of semicolons. There are a lot of rules, a lot of situations, and it's impossible to summarise all of them. Suffice it to say that when you have a sentence, it's quite often consists of a group of clauses that are separated together, and we often use a semicolon to separate the parts of a sentence, the clauses, that belong still to the same sentence. So the meaning is encompassed within that sentence, but the parts within it that all relate to that one sentence, we quite often use semicolons. But as I said earlier, refer to that document at the back of the handout, and you'll see a better or more detailed explanation. So look, I thank you for your attention and your participation. We're now going to start. I'm going to hand out some activities for you to do, and you can pair up if you wish or work on your own, and we'll review them at the end.